Salutations, this is Crazed Kitsune, aka Khuma'zi Tayuun, and welcome to Tanks for Dummies. This is a basic tips guide for tanking. I won't be covering anything particularly advanced, I won't be going over specific skills or rotations or anything like that. This is just the basics that every tank should know. So, let's begin with a definition. What is a tank? Simply put, a tank is the player whose job it is to grab the attention and hold it of enemies. Your job as a tank is to make sure that the enemies are beating on you, not your party. You have the health and the defense and the defensive cooldowns to do this. Now, pulling is a bit of a complicated beast. Depending on the groups of enemies, you are going to pull differently. There's going to be different kill priorities. But one very important thing that I do as a tank, unless I'm doing a huge group pull, which I don't do very often because I'm just not comfortable with it, but if you're doing a big group pull, you don't need to do this. But if it's a smaller pull, where AoE DPS is going to be generally not really a thing, you're going to want to mark the order you want stuff to die in. That way, the DPS are all on the same page, and you're not fighting two different people for aggro on two different targets. You're just holding the hate on your primary target, moving to the next target when the primary is about to die, so that you can get a head start. If you have marked something number 1, and DPS decides, oh, well, I'm going to attack blank, because it's not marked, or something, that's them ignoring your marks. I will give them a pass once. I will ask them to follow my marks, and if they continue to attack the wrong target, well, now that's their problem. I marked the targets, I asked them to follow my marks, and they didn't listen to me. Because, guess what? Tank is the de facto leader of the party. You're the one who decides how quickly the run goes. You're the one who decides what to pull and when. How powerful and confident the healer is will determine how big you can pull, but you still decide whether you're pulling big. You decide what you're pulling, you decide where you're pulling it. People who don't let you do your job are going to disrupt the flow for the entire party, making it harder for everyone to do their job and possibly getting everyone killed because you can't hold hate. And it's not your fault. But even more important than pulling correctly and marking is knowing your skills. As a tank, you absolutely have to know which of your skills have increased enmity. What skills are used to build hate. Know them and use them. Your main job is keeping everything hating you. If you've got a good lead on hate, you can use your higher damage skills that don't have increased enmity. There are subtle nuances and so forth to being the best you can be as a tank. I won't be covering those at any point, because I prefer to focus on my primary task and not aim for the upper echelons of amazing goditude. That's mostly because there are too many jobs that I really like. Having to learn the upper echelon of, 10, 12 jobs it's just beyond me. But pulling, marking, and skills. These are things that are important. Another thing that is important is positioning. Once you have grabbed the enemies, you're going to want to gather them together, and you're going to want to point them away from your party. This is especially true in a boss fight. So let's say Emerald Carbuncle here is a boss, and the striking dummies behind him are your party. What you do not want to do is grab the boss and then make it look at your party. There are a lot of times where bosses will have simply instant use area attacks that are meant to only hit the tank. If you're pointing the boss at your party, you're getting them cleaved, which is bad. Always point enemies away from your party. Always. Now, yes, tanks have to hold the enemy's attention and they have to take a beating, but they don't have to take an unnecessary beating. If an AoE marker appears underneath your feet, get out of it. Don't stand in it. Don't pop a cooldown and eat it. That makes it harder for the healer to keep you alive. The harder it is for the healer to keep you alive, the easier it is for you to die. If you die, well, you're not in the hate list anymore, so the enemies turn around and go after whoever was next in the list. And they'll work their way through that list. You don't want that. So don't take unnecessary damage. If you can avoid damage without endangering your party, do it. If it's an attack that can be dodged, but dodging it will probably get your party hit, don't. You don't want your party getting hit. You taking a hit that you can easily survive versus you not taking a hit you can easily survive while your party takes a hit that they might die to is bad. Never do that. If, heaven forbid, someone manages to rip aggro off of you, do everything you can to get the hate back. Unless they're consistently doing it by attacking the wrong target. Then they need to learn a lesson. Let's see. Now, tanks do not have positionals. Yes, they are melee attackers, but they do not have positionals to worry about. When you're fighting an enemy, you don't have to get to their flank. You don't have to get to their rear. You can literally just punch them in the face all day long. Do not be afraid to use your defensive cooldowns. If it's a fight with tank busters you know you're going to need cooldowns for, save some of your bigger, longer cooldowns for those. Try to cycle. If it doesn't have any particular tank busters, or they're just like near impossible to predict, use your cooldowns at your discretion. But don't be afraid to use them. Anytime you're making yourself take less damage, makes it easier for the healer to keep you alive, and might even give them some time to do some DPS if they feel like it. Now, hate is based off of how much damage is done. Since we're on the tank class, I'm going to actually explain enmity a little more in depth than I have in the DPS and healer videos. On general DPS skills, enmity is 1-to-1. Every point of damage is a point of hate. On healing skills, it's 0.5-to-1. Every point of healing is half a point of hate. But on skills with increased enmity, such as a paladin's Savage Blade, it's 2-to-1 or higher. Meaning that for every point of damage they get 2, sometimes 3 points of hate. And the fact that the increased enmity gives them so much extra hate per point is why you need to know what skills have this and use them. Build as much hate as you can, as quickly as you can. Use your tank stance to further increase the enmity you gain. Me, as a tank, I sit in my tank stance basically non-stop. I know I'm not doing as much damage as I could, but that's not the point. By sitting in tank stance for the entirety of every fight, I'm generating so much hate that it's almost impossible for anyone to rip off of me unless they're on the wrong target. So, as a tank, your first priority is making the enemy hate you with every fiber of their being. That way, you can keep them off of your party, keep them looking away from your party, and just in general, make it easier for your DPS to kill everything and let your healer keep you alive through anything that you can't dodge. So, what things does a tank have to worry about? Well, you have to worry about positioning the enemy so your DPS and your healer aren't in danger of being hit, and so that your melee DPS can get their positionals without having to step into a dangerous area. You have to keep track of the hate of all the enemies. You have to make sure you're not losing aggro on anything. You will also need to sometimes pay attention to your party members' health, simply because they may take a hit from an enemy that you didn't see in the first place, and they just unfortunately face-pulled. It's very easy to miss some enemies that just patrol around. You need to be aware of everything around you all the time. You need to know whether or not your party is following you so you don't go pull without the healer. You need to watch hate, you need to watch your own health, because if your health is starting to get low, the healer might be having trouble healing you. You may need to use some cooldowns just to keep yourself up a bit longer so the healer can catch up. Tanking is honestly one of the hardest things to do properly, because small mistakes can make huge problems. The tank is the second most important member of the party. Yes, you're the leader, but you're not the one who keeps everyone alive. Your healer is the heart of your party. Without them, you can't win a fight. So, protect your healer. Do everything in your power to make sure nothing attacks your healer. Sometimes DPS will get a little overeager, and they may take a couple of lumps while you're trying to establish your hate because they jumped in a little too soon. It happens. As a general rule, you're the one leading the party through a dungeon. You take the lead. You're in the front. That's because enemies can be just around a corner, and if somebody's running around the corner, the enemy will see them and start trying to kill them. If it's you, great. If it's your DPS or your healers, why weren't you in front? Overall, the 3 roles aren't terribly complicated, but the simplest is DPS. And then there's healer. And then there's tank, because you have to watch for AoEs coming your way, you have to watch to make sure enemies haven't wandered up and face-pulled your team, you have to watch the enmity of every enemy you've got, you have to watch your health, you have to watch your party's health just to make sure none of them have face-pulled. You have to watch your status, you have to remember to use your cooldowns, you have to remember to use your hate skills, you have to make sure that the enemies are gathered together and facing away from your party, and sometimes you might have a DPS who just seems to refuse to get their positionals. I know I once had a ninja who was standing to the enemy's flank instead of their rear, when the only positional they have at the time is a rear positional. They weren't getting maximum damage. It bothered me. So I shifted my position slightly to turn the enemy so that their butt was in the ninja's face. Yes, that's right, I forced a positional on the ninja. This is something you may have to do. What you definitely do not want to do is run circles around the enemy. That makes them constantly turn around, making it almost impossible for melee DPS to get their positionals, and therefore they do less damage. Also, they might happen to get hit by random AoEs that they shouldn't have. So when you grab, you stand your butt still in front of the enemy unless it's an attack you have to dodge. At which point, you dodge it, the enemy is just going to stand there while they're casting it, and then you get back into position. That's right. Emmy here is a boss, and he's decided he's going to do a conal at me. So I step out of the conal, and as soon as its marker goes away, I step back in. Because when the marker disappears is when the game decides if you're getting hit by an AoE. There are some AoEs that will have a more prolonged effect and will continue to do damage for a little while. There aren't a lot of them, but they exist. If you know that's one of those AoEs, then you step out, wait for the animation to end, and then you resume your position. Positioning yourself as a tank is pivotal, because a poorly positioned tank makes it hard for your DPS to do their job and makes it hard for your healer to not get murdered. But I believe I've covered all the basics. Grabbing enemies, pulling them together, establishing your hate, marking them so that the DPS know what to kill first, using your cooldowns to help yourself stay alive so the healer doesn't have to work quite as hard to keep you up. Facing the enemies. Yeah, there's a lot to tanking. If you know what you're doing, it's not hard and can actually be really fun. But if you don't know what you're doing, it can be frustrating because you're not sure what's wrong. I know I originally had no interest in playing tank. I only decided to pick tank up because I was in a free company and I wanted to be able to help out my friends in the free company. So I grabbed a tank class and I started leveling it, and I enjoyed it. So now I have 2 tank classes at max. I'd have 3, but I don't really enjoy playing the other. But that's the basics. This should help any new tanks not make some of the most basic rookie mistakes out there, such as running their butt around wildly while tanking Ifrit, getting your party members hit with fire breath constantly. Yeah, I've seen that happen. It's annoying. With the basics covered, I hope this video has been helpful. Even if it wasn't, I was going to make it anyway because I just felt like it. Until my next video, goodbye.